Hey YouTube, I just finished my first year of video reviews and I haven't yet received any anniversary presents. So...
That's me!
I didn't play that many shitty games last year because I usually research them more before I spend any money on them. But I definitely played more than 10 games last year, so I could still come up with a top and bottom 5. So let's find out what they are as I review the video games of 2013. Saving the best for last, let's get started with the 5th worst game I played last year, Beyond Two Souls. I know everyone calls this game Beyond Two Souls, but that's where they put the colon. I actually had a pretty great experience with this title. I thought the story was super interesting, and I thought it was visually fantastic for how well it was able to capture the performances of people like Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe. But how is it in my worst games of the year if it sounds like such a positive review? The problem I had with this is that I played a really good movie, but this was a video game. I'm aware that this is how Quantic Dream makes video games, but I'm also not required to like it. Their games are usually long QuickTime events, and usually events that you shouldn't have to control. Most games have QuickTime events that are life or death situations, like in God of War when you have to press the square button to keep a sword from hitting you in the face. In this game you have to hit the left and right shoulder buttons to make Ellen Page put her feet on the ground when she gets out of bed. I would actually prefer it if you would just assume that she knows how to do that on her own. It's something that I do almost every day without having to think that much about it. Come on, what? Oh. But since I really like the story and the graphics and the actors all did great jobs, I'm still going to recommend that you pick up a controller and play this movie. The 4th worst game on my list also doesn't technically belong in the worst games of the year list, but parts of it did make me angry, and that game is The Last of Us. Technically, the only thing wrong with The Last of Us is the hype. This was a good game that was talked up so much that it couldn't possibly live up to it. Kinda like every game that's ever been called a Halo killer. When I played this game, I felt completely deflated by the fact that it didn't seem anywhere close to what I had heard. The story was good and it elicited some emotional responses from me, but I couldn't really praise it that much because it just seemed like a script for The Walking Dead. But instead of a zombie virus, this was a fungus. And the game looked about as good as you could make a game that was set about 50% of the time in bland cities. But I'm still not really sure why this game didn't work for me. Maybe it was the gameplay that was thoroughly average, had too much stealth, and had a bunch of characters that could kill you in one hit. But I think it's more likely that the propaganda machine just set the expectations too high. The 3rd worst game on my list is my own damn fault. I should have known better than to ask for it in the first place. And that game is Injustice: Gods Among Us. Ultimate Edition! Mountain Dew! My real problem with this game is that it's a fighting game. I'm just not into fighting games. In my experience, fighting games are always interesting for a matter of hours until I finish the story mode and get bored. I'm just not competitive enough to play any one fighting game enough to get really good at it. And I'm certainly not going to waste my time sitting around analyzing frame rates. And it's basically just a straight up fighting game. Kick, punch, it's all in the mind. You could also knock characters from one level to another, which was cool the first time you see them. The super moves were about 50-50. They gave really cool super moves to shitty characters like Aquaman, and then a character like Batman just hits someone with the Batmobile. Graphically, this game wasn't impressive either, and I took issues with some of the things that they did to the characters' costumes. Like, try taking this test. Batman 1 or Batman 2? I also waited so long to pick up this game that they had already released an Ultimate Edition of it, so I had a few more characters to get bored with really quickly. What? Now I can play with Batgirl and Zatanna? Fuck off. Finally, now that we've arrived at the runner-up for my worst game of the year, we can get to a game that I actually hated. And that game is Saints Row 4. This game created an unnatural amount of anger in me. When it comes to the Saints Row series, I've always had a pretty good idea of what I was getting myself into. It's a blatant Grand Theft Auto ripoff that doesn't take itself so seriously. I'm aware of that. I was never that big of a fan of Grand Theft Auto, but injecting a little humor into the equation has always made it work for me. But this game seemed to indicate that it was bored of ripping off Grand Theft Auto, and so it decided to go off on its own and rip off Crackdown. Which is a great idea. Given a choice, always rip off the far inferior game. And the humor that they attempted to inject into this never really worked for me. Most of the time seeming like their idea of comedy was just making unfunny things happen, but make the character naked or holding a dildo. And if you really want to blow the audience's mind, both. I also found the game somewhat glitchy when I played it, and they actually made glitches part of the game since you were supposed to be in a computer simulation. And why not? What gamer doesn't love glitches? I actually found myself so irritated and deflated by this game that I never actually beat it. I just got bored one day and wandered into the living room never to play the game again. And now, for the winner of the worst game of 2013, Aliens, Colonial Marines. Now, this game is a bona fide piece of shit. There's absolutely nothing in this game to justify its existence. Let's start with the story that bases itself on the universe of Aliens and then decides to tell it to go fuck itself. For instance, the character Hicks from Aliens is alive. Hicks managed to escape the vessel from Aliens but decided that he didn't give a shit about Newt and Ripley and left them on the vessel to die in Alien 3. Oh, and he had time to rescue them too because he had enough time to put a decoy body in there for some stupid reason. But why would he do that? Well, this game explains it by having the Hicks character say, "Long story." Great. So basically the only character from Aliens you got to sign on to making this game was Michael Biehn, and so you just had to make up whatever bullshit you could to fit his character in there. It certainly didn't seem like you needed him in the game because you didn't really bother to make his character look anything like him. But in their defense, if they removed all that alien stuff, this would just be your average shitty first-person shooter. Alright, let's stop being so negative. Let's talk about the good times. I chose this game for the 5th worst game of 2013 just to annoy people. And that game is Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm probably never going to be able to please the side of my audience that likes Grand Theft Auto, just like Grand Theft Auto is probably never going to be able to please me. I've just never been able to find the same level of enjoyment in these games as other people do. I've even tried to study how these other people play it in hopes of finding that I've been doing it wrong. And apparently I have been, because I've been trying to play the story and trying to finish all the side missions while these people are just running around in circles blowing things up with a bazooka. But how is that fun? To spend hours shooting at random things trying to collect wanted levels until you finally succumb to bullets just to start the whole thing over again. I don't know how that's fun, but apparently everyone else does. I never find the story that impressive, but the one in this one was pretty good. The gameplay is almost identical, but it does look really nice and the map is huge, which is kind of a good thing, but it also makes the game take a really long time to load. So I'm going to recommend this game, but you probably already played it. Okay, what I said with the last game was kind of a lie. I didn't make Grand Theft Auto number 5 to piss people off. What I did to piss people off is I put Pokemon one step above it. Okay, so everything I said about the Grand Theft Auto series could easily be said about the Pokemon series in retaliation to me. Because I'm sure most people, and especially the type of people that play Grand Theft Auto, are not going to understand the appeal of Pokemon. But I can't help myself. I just love them, and I know that I have a problem. I cannot help but catch them all. I buy both games so that I can catch them all and send them to myself to become the Lord Almighty of Pokemon. And for no specific purpose, because when any of my friends want to battle me, I'm not interested. I don't actually want to do anything with my Pokemon, I just want to have them all. Like a Pokemon hoarder. But the reason I rate these games so highly is the same reason that other people would rate the Grand Theft Auto games so highly. Because of how many hours of enjoyment you can get out of something that you spent so little on. I spend $40 on one Pokemon game, and more often than not, the clock in the game will stop before I do. Since I don't really play games online that much anymore, there are very few ways to get more bang for your buck than a Pokemon game. But admittedly, they don't really change that much. Graphically, these games are a pretty big improvement because they're actually on a 3D console. The story doesn't technically involve Team Rocket, but it might as well have. The bad team is causing trouble and you have to stop them, but of course you're gonna win because you're better friends with your captive animals than they are. They also added some new Pokemon, putting their total up to 718. You'd think they'd have run out of ideas by now. And they kind of have. But I still love this game, because it's Pokemon. And that's all I need it to be. Gotta catch 'em all, Pokemon! Speaking of which, the third best game on my list is Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. Remember when I did a video review of this game? How young and full of life I was when I made that video. Of course, that might have been because of this game, which was so beautiful in its artistic presentation that it instantly transports you back to childhood. Of course, the story is kind of confused about what age range this is for. Because the story of the game is really touching and deals with some really heavy emotional issues like the death of your mother and spousal abuse. But the game also seemed like it wanted to be for children because of its cartoonish presentation and because of how long they spend teaching you the simplest mechanics in the gameplay, which are basically just Pokemon. But, as I said before, I do love Pokemon, and also I spent 237 hours playing the game. And since you can now get the game for $20, that's some pretty good bang for your buck as well. My number 1 and number 2 games for the year came out so close to each other that my written reviews came out consecutively. And so my runner-up for best game of 2013 is Tomb Raider. I always liked the Tomb Raider series, but I never loved them. And sometimes I hated them. And Lara Croft was all but forgotten before they put this game out. This Tomb Raider game actually has a story, and it's a good one. Unlike the other Tomb Raider games that either didn't have a story or shouldn't have had a story. They actually made a real and interesting person out of Lara Croft while still keeping everything that we liked about her. Well, except for her ridiculous boobs. Now she looks like a real person instead of a freakish Barbie person. The game was also beautiful, and the gameplay was extremely satisfying. Sure, it's basically Uncharted with the option for a bow and arrow, but if you're gonna steal from someone great. The game that tops my list will not only find itself on my best games of 2013, but will probably also find itself on my best games of all time. And that game is BioShock Infinite. This game did everything right. From its story, to its gameplay, to its graphics, everything in this game was beautiful. Sure, it wasn't photorealistic, but that's not really what they were going for. They were trying to create a world, and it was equally as impressive to fly into Colombia for the first time as it was to swim into Rapture for the first time. And they made both of these worlds just come to life. The gameplay wasn't drastically different from the other BioShock games. You've got your guns and you've got your plasmids, although in this game they call them vigors. You could also combine those vigors in different and interesting ways, but I found myself sticking to the guns more often than not. Oh yeah, you also have that skyline thing, but I mainly just used that to get to where I was going. But one of the things that I was most impressed about in the gameplay was Elizabeth Comstock. She's going to follow you around for most of the game, but she's never going to become a nuisance like an Ico. Because Elizabeth is hot, she's adorable, she's amusing, and she's helpful. You don't have to protect her. She can't die. Enemies will act like she's not even there, even though she's pulling things out of a void to kill them with. Most of what she's going to do throughout the course of the game is throw you things that you actually need. This show sucks.
Booker, catch!
But I guess to me, the thing that makes this game so special is the story. The story of this game took my brain, rattled it around in my head, and fired it out of my ass. It's amazing that I've gotten around as well as I have since then. But it was worth it. And I already did. So that's all I have to say about the video games of 2013. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my videos. And if you have anything that you'd like me to review, don't forget to leave it in the comments below or on my Facebook fan page. And while you're leaving comments, why not tell me what you think your best and worst games of 2013 were? And come back next time when I'll be reviewing the films of 2013. So that's all for now. My name is Robert, and the games of 2013 have just been reviewed. Booker, catch!